came out of number 10 Downing Street, saying, Merkel said, if Germany wanted to leave the EU, they could do it, no problem. But the UK cannot leave without leaving Northern Ireland behind in a customs union and in full alignment forever. She said Ireland is the government's special problem and that Ireland must have a veto on Northern Ireland leaving. I mean, this is astonishing stuff. The thought of a German Chancellor telling a British Prime Minister that part of his territory would effectively be annexed. Now, you know all the historical connotations that is, of course, going to lead to. But that was what Downing Street put out. They even finished off the statement saying the call also made clear they are willing to torpedo the Good Friday Agreement. Now, I have to say that last sentence said to me that there's a fair bit of number 10 spin in this, because after all, Germany, indeed the European Union, are not signatories to the Good Friday Agreement. Struck me that was a bit over the top. There they were, getting in the first blow. And then Donald Tusk, the boss, of course, over in Brussels of the European Council, sent back a tweet directly to Boris Johnson. What's at stake is not winning some stupid blame game. At stake is the future of Europe and the UK, as well as the security and interests of our people. You don't want a deal. You don't want an extension. You don't want to revoke Quo Vadis. Well, I agree with him on one thing, because in many ways, with Brexit, the future of the European project is at stake. And he's right about that. So an extraordinary war of words. And so I thought, well, let's get some first-hand from Brussels. So I spoke just before I came on air to Adam Parsons, who is the new Europe editor for Sky News, and I asked him how was the mood in Brussels.
Yeah, some fascinating interventions and sort of claims. We think we know what Angela Merkel said to Boris Johnson. We certainly have number 10's word for that, although the German government has been pretty tight-lipped about its version of what went on. We've had intervention from Simon Coveney, the Irish Deputy Prime Minister, and I suppose most spectacularly of all, Donald Tusk, the European Council President, writing that tweet that he wrote very directly to Boris Johnson, but which he shared with the world. So I think it would be fair to say today the diplomatic gloves have pretty much come off. There are still those who in Brussels think that talks are continuing, that a deal is possible, but they are a rapidly diminishing number. I think most people imagine that soon, at least it will become evident that the talks aren't going to work. Although what I would say is that I think from both sides, the European and the UK sides, both will be reluctant to be the first ones to pull away from these talks.
No, it isn't the sort of truth that's been exposed here that actually right from the very start, and Monsieur Barnier made it pretty clear, and clearly Chancellor Merkel today, that they were never going to countenance Northern Ireland leaving the customs union. Isn't that really at the heart of this whole row?
I think it probably is true, because I think the UK proposals, almost as soon as they landed, I remember when they were first released, and Monsieur Barnier said that he felt that there had been progress, and that first reaction felt as if it was quite positive. And to be honest, ever since then, they have slowly been criticised more relentlessly by the European Union, by the European Commission. So, yes, I don't think there has ever been a suggestion that these proposals as they stand were going to get through. Now, clearly what we did think was that David Frost, Britain's chief Brexit negotiator, would enter into talks, and maybe that the two sides would start drifting towards each other. There certainly have been talks. Mr. Frost is now a regular visitor to Brussels, but there's no sign that the two sides have come anywhere near. It was described to me at first as being a gap that was wide but not unbridgeable. I have to say, I think that gap is more of a chasm, and I think it's proved very, very hard to get anything that remotely looks like a bridge over that chasm.
I agree with you completely. And of course, we have the summit coming up next Thursday and Friday, the 17th and 18th of October. And Boris Johnson, unless he's got some extraordinary ace card up his sleeve, and I can't see what it is, will have to go along to the council and ask for an extension. Given the current war of words that's going on between Germany, Donald Tusk and number 10, Are they likely to ask for a price for granting extension?
Well, it's interesting. You say this sort of war of words. I'd have to say that when you take a step back from it, what it looks like at the moment is a pretty united European Union. So they are putting themselves forward as, right, here we are, 27 countries against one. I think, as it stands, you are right in that the chances of him turning up at the European Council and saying, right, here's the deal, let's all sign it, are vanishingly tiny. So I think that they will then say, right, law says you've got to ask for an extension. Whether or not Mr. Johnson will say at the council, right, here I go, I'm asking for an extension, well, that remains to be seen. You will have your finger on the politics even better than me, Nigel, but my guess is that Boris Johnson may have to be taken kicking and screaming to actually ask for that extension. So whether he'll do it there, I'm a bit dubious. And what sort of extension they'll give him? The word here is that it will probably be to the end of January, but then you talk to others and they say, no, let's do it longer, let's get this resolved. But I would say also a lot of people in Brussels are saying, let's do an extension and then sit back, watch the fireworks. They imagine that there's a general election round the corner.
Yeah, and of course 3:00 tomorrow afternoon, Brussels time, it'll be a meeting of the European Parliament and we can all go and play Happy Families. Adam Parsons, I'll see you there.
You will indeed.
Yep, I'll be there, and we're expecting Mr. Tusk to speak and maybe Mr. Juncker too, so we'll get the official reaction to that war of words that went on today. What does it all mean? Well, there has been a phone call tonight between the Irish Taoiseach and Boris Johnson, and they've concluded that by saying they both still want a deal. Look, the truth of it is, what's been said on both sides today, I think means this is completely unbridgeable. There is no way the EU were ever going to allow us out of the customs union. I've been certain of that ever since I met Monsieur Barnier officially on the 8th of January last year. My conclusion is that a clean break Brexit, a no-deal Brexit, got a whole lot closer today. I'm not suggesting it got closer for the 31st of October, but in terms of our direction of travel, I think it got a whole lot closer, and I'm asking you, do you agree? 0345 6060 973. Let's go to Mark, who's calling from Liverpool. Mark, good evening to you.
Hi Nigel, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. And I'm actually feeling quite bullish, Mark, because my biggest fear was Mrs May's new EU treaty, or a variant of it, going through, and us being half in, half out, and stuck in Never Never Land. So I'm actually rather pleased that I think we're heading towards the binary choice of in or out.
Well, I think you've been proven right all along now. It's coming down to the wire, and all along you said that this is going to happen, and you know people have to take notice of you now. I think today. Some of the things I don't agree with what you say, but
Fine.
Mostly I'm in agreement with you, and I think what they don't realise is what the European Union don't realise is that our history with Germany goes back a long way, good and bad.
Yep.
Most of it bad, should we say? And this is going to have a real bad effect, I think, on the electorate.
Yeah, I mean, this is why, Mark, isn't it? That I think Number 10 made a preemptive strike today by putting out a message couched inside. Well, I do begin to think, that the way that Number 10 responded to that call today, they've decided they want to sink this deal.
It's all a part of the chess. It's all part of Dominic, and I know how you feel about Dominic Cummings, but he is an extremely intelligent man, extremely intelligent. He wouldn't be in that job otherwise. Boris wouldn't have chosen him for that job.
Well, I think his choice to push for a Queen's speech has proved to be a catastrophe in terms of tactics, but hey...
But was that part of the tactics? Was that part of what he wanted to do?
Well, if it was, it wasn't very clever, because he finished up with a Supreme Court ruling against him. He finished up, with a much bigger fight on his hands than he needed. But hey... Mark, maybe the whole theory was enrage the world, and if that was what the strategy was, it's been quite successful. Has a clean break Brexit come closer today, Mark, in your opinion?
Yes, but whether it's end of October, it might be towards the end of January. I think we'll get a general election in November. Mm-hmm. I think Boris Johnson definitely has to do something with you. He has, because he's not going to get the Labour Party. I live in Liverpool, and you know what? It's Labour. No matter who's there, it's going to be Labour. It's Labour. And the only options that he's got in the north of England is to do some deal with you. Otherwise, he's not going to get a majority. He's going to lose in Scotland. I think he'll lose all those. I don't think he'll lose 13 seats, those 13 seats that he gained, but I certainly think he'll lose half of them.
No, he's got some huge decisions to take. Mark, thank you for your call. Tony in Staines says, finally, the EU's position is clear. Take over part of our nation, as simple as that. Even Remainers I've spoken to today are angry. They say, let's just leave. Tony, that's exactly what Arlene Foster said. Arlene Foster, leader of DUP, and she made the comment. She said, actually, the cat's out of the bag. They've told us what it was about all along. It was about satisfying Dublin, who effectively want Northern Ireland to go with them in a new united Ireland. And I think the DUP absolutely spitting tacks this morning when I spoke to one or two of them. Barry said, let's get out and then resume negotiations. Sean says, if we can't leave the EU, can we please at least leave Eurovision? I don't think I can cope with another Eurovision Song Contest. I completely understand those sentiments, Sean. I think we're closer to a no-deal Brexit. I don't believe for a moment we're leaving on the 31st of October, but I think after the next general election, I think we will. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:15, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Does a war of words with the German Chancellor mean that a clean break no deal got closer today? I think it probably did. Before I get back to that, I've been talking last night enthusiastically about planting trees and suggesting that some of those who are clogging London streets might do something more constructive. And I have to say, one or two really positive bits of feedback. Dr. Alison Seeger wrote to me enthused and said, what about getting children in classes to grow acorns and seeds, watch them grow and go off and plant them? And yeah, I'm absolutely with that. And Deborah Howard went even one stage further and said, just to let you know, today I purchased 2 trees that have been planted by the Woodland Trust in a forest near Chelmsford. Good, because that is something positive that we could do. Back to your calls, your messages, your thoughts. Paul in Braintree says, I feel the most positive I've felt about the prospect of a clean break Brexit. Well, do you know what? I'm feeling very similar today. Martin in Liverpool says, there seems to be a lot of tennis being played between the EU and the UK. I will now only believe in leaving if and when it happens. Well, I think it got closer today. Robert says, let's have a general election and the winner takes all. And I guess it's going to be that kind of general election. And interestingly, efforts being made now on the Remain side to try and have some unity. The Liberal Democrats saying they will not stand against Dominic Grieve in Beaconsfield, being an example. Oh, and a word for Heidi Allen. I must say something about Heidi Allen. I really, really must. She's the Member of Parliament for South Cambridgeshire. She was elected in 2017 on a ticket of leaving the European Union, if necessary, on no deal being better than a bad deal. And in 2019, she sat in the House of Commons for the Conservative Party. She sat in the House of Commons for Change UK. She has sat in the House of Commons as an independent, and now she sits in the House of Commons as a Liberal Democrat. 4 different party designations in the space of 6 months. No thought of giving her electorate a chance to have a say, treating them with total contempt. She is typical, in my view, of the modern professional career politician. Let's get back to the events of today and what they mean. I'm going to Simon in Harwich. Good evening, Simon.
Hello, Nigel. Thank you again for letting me on your show.
We've spoken before. You're the former Labour councillor, aren't you?
Yes, we've spoken about 3 or 4
I remember.
times.
Yeah, I remember. Over the years, we have. So, what do you make? What do you make of today's developments?
I think, sadly, I voted to leave, as you know before.
Yep.
I am a member of the Labour Leave group.
Yep.
I have a theory, though, and I'm worried. I think, actually, the people of the Liberal Democrats and a lot of people in my Labour friends as well, I think actually want us to come out, and now hear me out on this, actually come out with no deal so we can go straight back in and sign up to the Euro and everything else.
Simon.
And that is a big worry for me.
Simon, don't worry, and I'll tell you why. If we had a campaign to rejoin, all right, they would have to put that to a referendum. And the thought of us voting to rejoin a club with all the demands they make on us, I would put that prospect of almost next to nothing, Simon.
I still think it's it's not out of the ball. I truly think that's what some people are praying for, so we can so we can get back in.
I just don't think, if you said to the British government, you've got to sign up to the euro, the military force and all the rest of it, I just don't think we do it, Simon. I genuinely don't. I think if we have a clean break, that's it, we move on.
I hope so. I really hope so, because I am many other people I talk to in all walks of life, even in my job and everything else. It appears everyone wants this done. Be it deal or no deal, we just want out.
Just
a lot of people are saying this.
Now, you're sounding very down, Simon. How do you feel, about your former party, who now, having promised to respect the result of the referendum, want a second referendum and a choice between remaining or almost remaining?
Well, I still am a member of Labour.
Are you? How? How can you be?
Well, you have to fight from within if you want to change.
Can I suggest you're not doing very well at that at the moment?
Well, I'm only one person, but if enough people get together and progress and Labour first and things like that internally against Momentum, or Socialist Party or whatever you want to call them, militant tendency, whatever,
Simon, I wish you well. I'm pleased to hear from you again. I'm not surprised you're sounding a little bit down in the mouth. Thank you for your call. Off to the Isle of Man, to Ramsey, to speak to Tristram. Tristram, hello, how are you?
I'm very well, Nigel. Thank you for taking the call.
Not at all.
I think that Dominic Cummings has had a cunning plan, and I think they've cracked it, because this was always about sovereignty, and okay, you might not like some things in the deal, I certainly don't, but they snuck in this little thing, this default about Northern Ireland, and it's been laid bare. The EU is on a land grab. It was after a piece of our sovereign British territory to rule over permanently, and that was never going to be acceptable to the DUP, probably never acceptable to Parliament. And here's the interesting bit. The constitutional arrangements in Northern Ireland mean that the DUP, even if there was a Sinn Féin majority, could withhold consent for a regulation to be handed over to Brussels. They were never going to do that. And it's gone to the wire, and the issue is what it always was, sovereignty. Who rules Britain?
Yeah.
Our union or their union?
Yeah, and particularly when it's said by a German chancellor, somehow, doesn't that make us just a little bit angrier?
Well, it does make me angry, Nigel, because it makes me very angry, because I got family who fought in 2 world wars, and we fought bitterly to stop that country having any control over our territory. Things have moved on.
Some would say, Tristram, that is backward looking. Some would say it's backward looking.
You mean that Germany's backward looking?
No, for us to talk about 2 world wars, some people say that it's backward looking and it's wrong.
But we have, for 1,000+ years, always had this issue of sovereignty, with parts of Europe wanting a slice of our action, and we have always generally gone to the wire and stopped it, and it's happened again. And, we're saved in the nick of time, I think, by, a clever strategy. Finally, like a bubble rising in treacle, the establishment is going to work it out, that this is basically about another country, the EU, an undemocratic country, trying to take control over part of terra firma.
Do we now, Tristram, now that this sovereignty point is very clearly established, do we now as a nation decide that leaving with a clean break, no deal is the right way forward?
Yes, in a simple word.
Okay, no, I'm going to leave it there, because you've made your argument, you've made your point. I have to say, I rather agree with you. I do think that's where we're going. Jamie on Twitter is much more negative. He said it'll all end in tears. The EU will grant a 6-month extension rather than a short one to allow for a second Remain referendum. Jamie, let me promise you one thing. If the price of extension, if Johnson has to obey the Benn Act, which I rather think he does, if their price was they demand of us a second referendum, then I think the Leave side will win it by a landslide if we have a half-reasonable question. The thought of the European Commission, of Juncker after lunch telling us what we should and shouldn't do, would make us much angrier than a German Chancellor telling us what we should and should not do. Andrew is calling from Halifax. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, Nigel. Good as always. Well, I've been saying to various LBC presenters over the last year and a half that the purpose of the EU was to effectively make Northern Ireland the price of Brexit, and that strategy has been laid cold, hard and bare this morning. And everybody talks about, well, the Belfast Agreement was a fudge, it was this, it was that, it allowed both people to identify. It didn't. The Belfast Agreement reaffirmed UK sovereignty over Northern Ireland. It runs through that agreement like the name Blackpool does through a stick of Blackpool rock. And part of that contract is for Northern Ireland to play a full part in the life of the British nation, which up to and including our democratic decision to leave the EU.
Yeah, so Andrew, that phone call with Angela Merkel today has done us all a favour.
Well, they always say that those who, don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. On the 12th of March 1938, Germany annexed Austria into Nazi Germany territory through the Anschluss program.
Yes, they did.
It is now trying to annex a piece of sovereign British territory into the EU's orbit on a permanent basis. Okay,
it's not a direct comparison, but I do understand why you're making that point. Andrew, thank you for your call. Was some very, very strong opinions in that half an hour. And in a minute, I'm going to tell you why your opinions perhaps should be even stronger, because a really quite extraordinary statement yesterday by the incoming boss of the European Union's foreign policy. It's about the EU's future, and in particular the army that the Remainers deny even exists. But for now, you listen to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:30 in time for the news with Lisa Aziz.
Downing Street's confirmed Boris Johnson has spoken to the Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar this evening about the Brexit negotiations, and both sides have reiterated their desire to reach a deal. Earlier, the EU Council President Donald Tusk accused...
Well, one of the things that I've really been very, very struck on since the 20 years that I've now been going to Brussels is this complete fabrication that's been sold to the British people for over half a century, that we're involved in something that is primarily economic. They started off telling us it was a common market. Now they tell us, of course, that it's wonderful for our economy and for jobs and for investment and for wealth, and that actually outside of it, terrible things would happen to us. And whenever we on the Leave side try to point out that actually it's political with huge ambitions, we're told it's simply not true. Now, 5 years ago, LBC hosted a debate between myself and the then Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg. Nick Ferrari was in the chair, and I said in the debate that one of the reasons I did not want to be part of a European Union is I did not want to be part of a European army, which I thought, amongst other things, would damage NATO and would be in the hands of a very unaccountable group of leaders. Here was what Nick Clegg said back to me in 2014.
This is a dangerous fantasy.
Oh, really?
The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true.
Oh. So there we are, not true. And I've had Lord Adonis sitting in this studio saying, no, it's not happening. I've spoken to other quite famous Remainers, Rory Bremner, one of them, who tell me it's all a lie. It's not true. Well, try this for size. Have a listen to this. British establishment, Remainers and apologists. Joseph Borrell, he is a Spanish veteran politician, a former president of the European Parliament. He is about to take over as a European Commissioner in charge of Europe's foreign policy. Yesterday, he sat before a committee who were there in Brussels asking him questions ahead of his almost certain approval. He made it clear the European Union needs to have 60,000 troops on the ground. We should reinforce the EU's international role and further our military capacity to act. He then went on to say, we have the instruments to play power politics. The EU has to learn the language of power. And that's what it's all about. It's about building a European empire, an expansionist European empire with its own military force that the incoming foreign policy boss wants to use at will all over the world. Oh, and by the way, they also want to remove any potential veto rights on the ability to go to war. So please, end the lies, end the nonsense. This is not about economics, it's about power politics, and the sooner we're out of this dangerous club, the better. The better. Let's go to Paul, who's a new caller from Ipswich in Suffolk. Paul, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, have we got a bit closer to, well, either, I suppose you could say, closer to a clean break or closer to remaining, perhaps?
Boris is going to have to, or Mr. Johnson, I should say, is going to have to go and request an extension, isn't he? Else he's breaking the law.
Yes.
I don't think he's going to want to do that. So I would say we're closer to just delaying it a bit further. I do actually think we should leave, but I don't think we should leave on no deal. But the reason I rang up, if I may, the point I want to make is around people. I keep hearing people using the war as some sort of excuse, and I think I saw a tweet today, leave.eu.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've seen it.
I have seen it.
We won 2 wars, world wars, and let's not listen to that crowd. You know, that sort of language, I think, is absolutely disgusting. It's abhorrent. And it's always, we won 2 world wars. Well, who's we, right? I'll tell you who we is. It's a very small number of people now. One of those people happens to be my granddad. He's 97 years old, 98 actually in December.
Yep.
I went to Monte Cassino with him earlier this year.
Oh, wow.
We did a tour of some of the areas where he fought and the war graves, and it was an incredibly moving experience. And he's a staunch Remainer. He's got an EU flag in his garden. And he always says the reason why they fought for that is to unite Europe, right, against all the evil forces. You know, everyone still thinks Germany is evil, like they're the Nazis.
Paul, it's fascinating. You know, I have met World War II veterans who feel like your grandfather. I've also met, I would say slightly more World War II veterans who say, hey, hang on, this is all about us being a free, independent country. So we can all draw different conclusions from history. But that wasn't why the war was fought. It wasn't fought for Britain to be free and independent. Well, it was actually fought. It was against the Nazis, right? It was fought for Poland. It was fought for Poland to be free, and in turn us as well. And it was fought. Paul. The reason people make the argument is they argue that we fought the war. And by the way, 40% of our contribution came from what is now called the Commonwealth, and we fought the war because we believed that no one country should dictatorially take over the whole of the EU. Yeah. And that's the comparison people draw. And by the way, the use of the word kraut is not helpful. I would agree with you.
I do agree. But
I would agree with you.
I don't believe that, we're singling out Germany here. The EU, as you well know, is, a lot of different nations, 27 nations, that all have their vote on things, right? It's not dictated by Germany. They're not trying to land grab Northern Ireland like your previous caller. Paul, where do these people get their theories from? They want Northern Ireland. Really?
There are very, very few vetoes left within the European Union. It is the big states that control the whole show, and they will do it very, very soon.
And we are one of those big states. We had a control over that we're going to throw away now.
But we lost vote after vote after vote. Paul, if you wanted to leave with a deal, do you accept that any form of New Deal now looks incredibly difficult because, and I'm going to put this to you, the EU have acted with bad faith?
I don't think they have acted with bad faith, and that's the other thing. I think the EU have said, right from the word go, this is what we want, and we've drawn our red lines, and let's not forget, the Tories have put us in this position. I see that Boris Johnson now is trying to make it out like it's all the EU's fault, and you can see the language, we've put forward this deal, and if they don't want to go with it, it's all their fault. The EU have said right from the word go, this is what we want. Theresa May spent God knows how long trying to get a deal for herself, didn't involve Parliament, and it all went a bit...
She got the whole thing wrong. Paul, she got the whole thing wrong. We started off saying that nothing was agreed till everything was agreed, and then we agreed to a sequencing where there was a withdrawal agreement and a future declaration. Paul, listen, great call. Great stories. Now, Graham in Aberdeen is opening the champagne. He's over the moon. A no deal is certain now. Germany has showed the EU's true agenda. Katrina in Milton Keynes is responding to my comments about Heidi Allen. She says some of these Remain career MPs treat their jobs like dating sites that they can jump and swap whenever they like without asking the electorate. Dave in Portsmouth says the big problem with yet another extension, it'll present an opportunity for more frustration, blocking and pushing for the revocation of Article 50. To save face, the Prime Minister really needs to deliver Brexit by the 31st of October. Well, Dave, this is his big problem. His big problem is he has been telling us over and over and over that we're leaving on the 31st of October, do or die, come what may, and if it doesn't happen, he has a problem. You know, could he face an extension rebellion? I don't know. Let's go to James, who's a new caller from Wellington in Somerset. James, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure to speak to you. So, I mean, did we see the true face of the EU today, or is that being too harsh?
I think we've definitely seen the true face of the EU today, and I just think I had a bit of hope in March as the deadline was getting closer that maybe a no deal, which is what I voted for, is what we were getting to, and then obviously it got delayed. I think after today, I think that Boris will eventually be forced to go in bed for an extension again.
Yep.
And I think ultimately what will happen is obviously we will have a general election, and I don't think that the Conservatives will get a majority, and I fear that I think the worst case scenario is if Corbyn did get into power and we ended up with a sort of hung parliament potentially, who I call the liberal undemocrats could pair up with him, and then it's self-destruction.
Well,
I don't think we're any further.
James, if effectively a new EU treaty is off the table, then clearly we're back to, at some point, a more binary choice on this, which is either remaining or it is leaving properly. I take your pessimism. I understand it. Thank you. Others take a different view on YouTube. Ryan says, an early election is a second referendum in disguise. Well, in a sense, it's likely to become that, yes. Chris says, general election equals game over for the Remainers, and him taking a very different view to James from Somerset, who didn't think Boris would be able to get a majority. We'll see. Lewis in Thornton Heath says, I don't agree that it's a clean break Brexit. No deal means the start of years of wrangling with the EU from a weak position. Lewis, some would say they'd be in a very weak position. But hey, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:45, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz.
Downing Street's confirmed Boris Johnson has spoken to the Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar this evening about the Brexit negotiations, and both sides have reiterated their desire to reach a deal. Number 10 says it will be responding to claims about Boris.
The London Assembly, as you know, had demanded that Boris Johnson answered questions about his relationship to American businessman Jennifer Arcuri, and we're told that Downing Street will be responding this evening to the claims that have been made that he gave her preferential treatment financially and on a series of overseas international visits as a result of a personal relationship. Extinction Rebellion, now more than 500 people have been arrested. A couple of stories on that. A couple of colleagues of mine, one trying to get onto Westminster Bridge last night was told, no, you can't go on the bridge, it's just for protesters. What? And another colleague this morning was coming into work early in Great Peter Street, which is in the middle of Westminster. There were no protesters, nobody on the street, but the road was closed. And he said to the policeman, well, why don't you open it for cars? No, we're waiting for the protesters. It's almost as if the police were keeping the bed warm for the protesters. Now, this strikes me as being all the wrong way round. There have been efforts this afternoon to clear Millbank in particular, I know. But within a few minutes of opening up the road, some other people come and lie down in the middle of it. The Queen's Highway is being blocked. People are being put out of business. And irony of ironies, a couple of the food stores in Westminster have run out of food. So it's not a no-deal Brexit that's leading to food shortages. It is Extinction Rebellion. I think the whole thing is a nonsense. Go out and plant some trees and stop protesting. Back to our topic. We're off to the Republic of Ireland, to Cork, to speak to Tom, who's a new caller. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Nigel. How are you this evening?
I am well. Now, Northern Ireland has been the focus of a lot of these arguments, Tom. What do you make of today's developments?
Well, Nigel, I think you're being a small bit glib there with your callers, chuckling away about Angela Merkel's attempt to steal the North. I think that...
Annex, yes.
Yes, I think that
well, they know,
the
Tom.
horrific history of...
Tom, they know that we won't do it.
And, Nigel, if you let me...
Yeah, go on.
15,000 people injured deserve a small bit more credit than having glib answers about Angela Merkel trying to take over Northern Ireland. The situation is far more complex than that. You know it.
Tom, it's a trap to keep. It's a trap to keep the United Kingdom inside the customs union. That's been Barnier's game from day one.
Nigel, unfortunately, this was pointed out long before the actual vote by our Prime Minister and by your two ex-Prime Ministers. There was a Good Friday. The Good Friday Agreement is an international peace treaty. It's signed by our government and your government. It was held, both sides, North and South, actually had a referendum. It's funny how some referendums are important, but the referendum that was held in our country and the Northern Ireland on the same day, both passed by a majority of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes.
But now that referendum suddenly isn't important anymore.
Tom, no one's Tom, nobody is saying that. And can I remind you that in the entirety of the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, there is no mention of customs unions.
Now, you might be better able to explain this than I can because you're been a politician.
No, I'm just telling you that. I'm just telling you that.
What is the hunt mechanism?
The de Hond mechanism is a very, very complicated system, electoral system, that is used... In fact, we use it in the European elections, for example.
You do indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
But you might explain how it's used in the North for parity of esteem.
Yes, I know that, and I also know, Tom...
That you want, by having the Brexit that you want, by giving the DUP, because it's the de Hond mechanism, a veto, as you know it will. Well, how does that count for parity of esteem?
What about consent?
What
about consent?
Maybe the history of the DUP. As you well know, you've been around. Were they against the Good Friday Agreement?
Yes, they were totally against it.
Were they against the Anglo-Irish Agreement?
Vehemently.
Were they against Sunningdale? And here's the killer,
Tom, it's 2019.
They were actually against one man, one vote. You know that. I know that.
Tom, if you want, we could go back to 1916, Tom, if you want to. Tom,
but what you're asking.
No, you don't want a conversation. You want to come on and rant, don't you? Tom, I'm going to give you one more chance of this conversation. Do you think it's reasonable that the German Chancellor should tell the British Prime Minister that the Taoiseach should have a veto over whether Northern Ireland can leave the European Union? Does that strike you as being democratic and reasonable?
What it strikes me, Nigel, is for a man of your experience to bring that argument and discussion that's going on in our country for hundreds of years down to one sentence, trying to discredit both the Taoiseach, Angela Merkel, over a phone call that neither of the two of us, we're not actually sure did it take place. We know it took place.
We know it took place, and we know the Germans haven't denied it.
We don't know if that's the verbatim. We accept
Is
that,
it reasonable for another country?
It's a leak from Dominic Cummings, and we know what you think of Dominic Cummings.
Tom, I get it. You support a united Ireland, don't you?
Don't you? We had a referendum the same day. What did we vote? We voted to remove Articles 2 and 3 from our Constitution.
Tom, do you support a united Ireland?
Every nationalist supports the United Ireland.
Thank you very much indeed. I tell you what, time is moving on. I'm going to go to Woking in Surrey and speak to Callum, who's a new caller. Callum, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. So I don't understand why Boris's deal is better than May's deal. I don't even think Boris thinks it's better than May's deal. I'm fairly sure Boris doesn't even think it's going to get through anyway.
Well, it's better in one sense, Callum, all right? It's better in one sense, which is that what Mrs May had put to us, OK, had within it, as you know, the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. And the political declaration, clause 23 of it, said that any future trade deal would build on the existing customs partnership. What it meant is there was no prospect ever of us leaving the customs union. That was what Mrs May left for us. It was the most horrendous trap. And what Boris did say, and I will say this was an improvement, was that has to be excised. That has to be removed, and there has to be a clear commitment that the UK in its entirety leaves the customs union in 2021 or whenever the extension ends. So, look, from a leaver's perspective, there was still lots of it I couldn't stand, but that part of it, I would argue, Callum, was better.
I actually think a no-deal Brexit isn't going to happen at all, actually, because I hear people saying that, so Boris's deal isn't going to get through, therefore we've got no deal. Actually, I personally think that there'll be a government of national unity, possibly, if they get their act in order with who they support. There'll be pressure from business to support a soft Brexit.
Do you mean people like Heidi Allen would be in the government, yeah?
Possibly.
Heidi Allen could join Labour now. That'd be 5 parties in 1 year. That'd be marvellous, wouldn't it? Having people like that running our country.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult one, to be honest, but I possibly think that Conservatives will collapse in the general election, and then splitting the vote with the Brexit Party. I think, businesses need to be able to trust the Conservatives, because I think that's what the Conservatives are founded on, reason.
Well, a lot of businesses, Callum, and this depends whether they're giant businesses or small businesses. It also, it depends whether they're corporates or entrepreneurs. But there are a lot of businesses who say to me, look, we would have preferred to remain, but we've taken a decision to leave. The fact we're spending years doing it means that investment into the United Kingdom is drying up. The sooner we get this over with, the sooner we know the cards we've got to play with, the sooner we can get on with the rest of our lives. Do you understand that argument coming from many businesses, Callum?
I completely understand that argument. I mean, I'm a Remain voter. I do still support the Labour Party, but I am democratic. I believe that we should leave the European Union, but I personally, and this is probably controversial, but I personally believe that May's deal is the way to move forward. Okay. It is a compromise. Fine.
Callum, thank you. We'll end on that note. I don't think it's got a cat's chance in hell, but Callum was supporting it. And I did detect that the temperature of the debate has risen somewhat today. I'll be back tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock from Brussels, having listened to the bosses responding directly to today's events. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick. Up next, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you. We're going to calm things down at 8 o'clock. We're going to celebrate Betty Boothroyd's 90th birthday by asking 4 of the contenders to succeed John Bercow to come into the studio and give us the reasons as to why they think they should become the new Speaker of the House of